My son, Pierce, had just gotten his driver's license. 17, proud, and still figuring out the finer details of parallel parking. That's how all this started. It was a Saturday morning, and I just stepped out onto the porch with my coffee when I heard the shrieking. Not yelling, actual shrieking. Who taught you how to park, a blindfolded donkey? I looked up and saw her, Helena Newell, HOA board member. The kind of woman who keeps a clipboard in her purse and calls herself community-minded. She was standing in front of Pierce's car, arms flailing like she was directing traffic in a thunderstorm. My son was standing there frozen, keys still in his hand. Back it up, you're crooked. You're 3 inches over the line. This is a violation. I walked down the driveway, already feeling my blood pressure rise. Helena, it's a neighborhood street. He's not blocking anyone. She turned to me, face twisted like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Owen Hargrove, your son is in violation of HOA Ordinance 14B. Section 3 clearly states that all vehicles must park within painted boundaries. This, she pointed like she was accusing a war criminal, is not compliant. I glanced at the curb. The paint was faded, barely visible. In fact, half the street didn't even have lines. Typical Helena, fabricating authority where there wasn't any. He's learning, I said. You could have told him without screaming like a banshee. She folded her arms. I'll be issuing a formal warning. 1 more infraction and we'll fine you. Fine me for what? Teaching my kid to drive. She didn't answer. Just spun on her heel and stormed off toward her beige SUV like she'd just won a courtroom battle. I looked at Pierce. Poor kid looked like he'd just been chewed out by a drill sergeant. I clapped him on the shoulder. Next time, just park on the empty lot across the street. He nodded, still wide-eyed. That lot. It was a gravel spot the HOA used to host their little monthly meetings and their summer yard sales. But here's the kicker, they didn't own it. I knew because I built half the neighborhood 15 years ago, and that lot had stayed in a legal limbo ever since the original developer went bankrupt. And that's when a very petty, very legal idea started forming in my head. By Tuesday evening, I had pulled the plat maps from the county assessor's website and made a few phone calls. The gravel lot across the street, the one Helena and her crew used like it belonged to them, had never been transferred to the HOA. It was still listed under a dissolved LLC. A few $100 in back taxes, and the county was more than happy to hand it over to someone willing to maintain it. The clerk at the county office. A guy named Felix with a voice like someone who'd seen too much bureaucracy, walked me through the process. You're telling me they've been using this without owning it? Looks that way. He gave a low whistle. If they've collected dues for use of it, that's a whole different mess. Appreciate the tip, I said. By Friday, the lot was mine. I had the paperwork, the receipt, and the deed in a manila folder on my desk. I didn't say a word to anyone. Not yet. I had a better idea. That weekend, I put up a simple sign at the entrance to the lot, private property parking by lease only. Below that, a smaller line, violators will be towed at owner's expense. It was polite, professional, legal. Monday morning, the fireworks started. I was trimming the hedges when a white sedan came to a screeching halt in front of the lot. Helena stepped out, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. She marched to the sign and stared at it like it had insulted her ancestors. Owen, she shouted across the street. What is this nonsense? I looked up from my clippers. Morning, Helena, that's a property notice. Pretty standard stuff, she stormed over. You can't just put that there. This land is for community use. Not anymore, I said. I bought it. County records are updated. You want to park there, you'll need a lease. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then she jabbed a finger toward the sign. This is harassment. You can't do this just to spite me. Oh, it's not about you, I said, brushing hedge trimmings off my gloves. It's about liability. People park there, someone trips, breaks an ankle, I'm not getting sued. She sputtered something about legal action, then marched back to her car. By the next HOA meeting, the lot was empty. No folding tables, no lemonade stands, no Helena with her clipboard. I didn't attend the meeting, but my neighbor Jorge did. He dropped by afterward, grinning like he'd just watched a soap opera. "She lost it," he said, leaning on my porch railing. "Tried to claim the HOA had verbal rights to the lot. Someone asked for documentation. She froze. Then someone else asked where all the dues went if they weren't paying for that land. I nodded. Sounds like a productive evening." Jorge laughed. "You have no idea. Turns out she's been collecting extra event fees for years. Claimed it was for insurance and maintenance. On land they didn't own, exactly. I think people are starting to connect the dots." The next morning, a letter arrived, certified mail, from the HOA's lawyer. It was a cease and desist, claiming my sign was creating undue confusion and distress among residents. I took a photo of the letter, sent it to my own attorney, then printed a second sign for good measure. This one read, "Lot under new ownership. All activity requires written approval." 2 days later, I noticed a silver truck idling across the street. A guy in a button-down shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand. He walked the lot, took photos, checked the sign, then made a call. I crossed over. "You with the city, county zoning," he said. "We received a complaint about unauthorized development." "Development? Someone claimed you were planning to build a structure." "That's news to me," I said. "Just put up a sign, no digging, no building, nothing against code," he nodded. "That's what I figured." "Mind if I confirm the parcel number?" I handed him a copy of the deed. He looked it over, whistled softly. "Well, you're clean. Whoever filed that report wasted our time." "Wouldn't be the first," I said. The next week, I received an anonymous letter in my mailbox, no return address. Just a single sheet of paper with the words, "You'll regret this. We always win." I handed it straight to my attorney, who filed a formal report. Threats weren't just petty, they were criminal when mailed. A detective followed up 2 days later, asking if I had any security footage. Lucky for me, I'd installed a motion-activated camera facing the street 2 years ago. We pulled the footage from the night before the letter appeared. It showed a woman in a beige hoodie creeping up to my mailbox around midnight. Her gait was familiar. Too familiar. The detective leaned in. "Is that who I think it is?" "I believe so," I said. They ran the image through a facial recognition program tied to public HOA meeting videos. Match confirmed. Helena was brought in for questioning the next morning. Not arrested yet, but the threat, combined with misuse of HOA funds and false reports to zoning, was stacking up fast. By the following week, a special meeting was called. Not by the board, by the residents. Word had spread. People were angry. Not just about the lot or the threats, but about the years of unchecked power Helena and her allies had wielded. I attended this one. The community center was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls. A spreadsheet was projected up front, showing HOA expenditures over the last 5 years. A retired accountant named Donna had gone through every line item and highlighted discrepancies. $3,200 for landscape consulting on a property we didn't even own, she said. And this entry here, emergency lot resurfacing. No permit was ever filed. Helena sat stiffly near the front, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Then someone stood up near the back. A young woman I hadn't met before. "My name's Rachel. I moved in 6 months ago. First thing I got was a violation for having a wind chime. Then another for my trash can being visible from the street. I paid the fines because I didn't know better. Now I'm wondering where that money went," people murmured. Heads nodded. Another voice. "They fined me for painting my mailbox the wrong shade of black." Didn't even know there were shades of black. The room shifted. You could feel it. The control Helena had relied on, fear, confusion, apathy, was slipping. Finally, someone proposed a recall vote. It passed. Not unanimously, but close. Helena stood, voice shaking. "You don't understand what you're doing. This neighborhood needs order. Without structure, we're not abolishing the HOA," someone interrupted. "We're cleaning it." After the vote, I stepped outside for air. Jorge joined me. "You know," he said, "you didn't just buy a lot. You bought a powder keg." I gave a tired laugh. "Didn't mean to start a war." "Maybe not," he said, "but you sure ended one." 2 weeks after the recall, the neighborhood was quieter on the surface. No more surprise finds on doorsteps. No more unannounced yard inspections. But under that calm, things were shifting. People who had once avoided speaking out had started exchanging stories, and not just about Helena. About the entire board. One evening, I got a knock at the door. It was Donna, the retired accountant who'd exposed the sketchy expenses at the meeting. She held a brown file folder against her chest like it might explode if mishandled. "I need to show you something," she said, stepping inside before I could respond. At the kitchen table, she laid out a stack of papers. Receipts, bank statements, and a spreadsheet with color-coded tabs. Nothing she'd shown at the meeting. "I didn't have time to go over everything last time," she said, flipping to a page labeled vendor payments. "But when I started digging deeper, I found something that didn't sit right." She pointed to a list of transactions made out to a company called Clearway Grounds Management, nearly $25,000 over 3 years. "Here's the thing," she said. "I looked them up. They don't exist. No website. No business license in the county, nothing." I leaned closer. "So where's the money going?" She tapped the next page, a routing number, then a name. "It was transferred to a personal checking account, belongs to someone named Richard Newell, Helena's husband." I sat back. "That's theft." "At best, embezzlement," Donna nodded. "I already talked to an attorney. He confirmed it. If they used HOA dues to pay a fake vendor and funneled the money to themselves, that's felony-level fraud." "Do the others know?" I told Rachel. "She's helping me contact more residents." "But we need to do this by the book." I agreed. We scanned everything, backed it up, and filed a report with the county's Financial Crimes Department. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Marla Dorsey, took it seriously from the start. "You'd be surprised how often this happens," she told me during our second meeting. "The HOA structure gives people just enough power to get greedy, and no one looks twice because it's just the neighborhood. But this is organized theft." She asked if I'd be willing to provide a written statement. I did, along with every document I had about the lot purchase and the retaliatory letter Helena had sent. Marla said it helped establish a pattern misuse of authority, intimidation, and now financial fraud. A week later, subpoenas were issued for the HOA's bank records. Then things got strange. Jorge, the neighbor who'd always had a good read on the pulse of the place, came by with a serious look on his face. "You see the moving truck on Alder Street?" he asked. "Helena's place. Middle of the night. No lights on, just loading everything like they're skipping town." "Think they know what's coming?" He nodded. "They know. I overheard one of the movers say they were headed to her sister's place in Nevada. She's not just moving, she's running." The next morning, the house was empty. No cars, no curtains, just a for sale sign staked into the lawn with a handwritten phone number taped over the realtor's name. No listing online. No agency logo, just a quick exit. But that didn't stop the investigation. Detective Dorsey came by the house with an update. "We traced the payments," she said. 4 accounts, all tied to either Helena or Richard. But what's more interesting, some of the money was transferred into a shell corporation registered in Wyoming. Classic laundering move. "Can you extradite?" She nodded. "We're working with the district attorney. If charges go through, we'll issue a warrant. Doesn't matter where she hides." Meanwhile, the neighborhood was undergoing its own quiet revolution. A temporary committee had formed to keep the HOA functioning while the formal elections were scheduled. Rachel, Donna, and a few others volunteered. They focused on reversing unfair fines, refunding residents, and rewriting bylaws to prevent the kind of unchecked authority Helena had abused. One of the first things they did was audit the reserve fund. What they found was worse than anyone expected. "Only $700 left," Donna told me, grimacing. "There should have been at least $20,000 for emergency repairs. They drained it." "How do you even siphon that much without red flags?" They spread it out. Labeled as consulting, legal review, vendor assessments, all fake. All funneled to the same accounts. The DA's office confirmed it. Helena and Richard had stolen over $53,000 from the HOA over 4 years, enough to trigger felony charges under state law. 3 weeks after filing charges, the sheriff's department in Nevada picked them up outside Reno. They were living in a rental under Richard's cousin's name. When they were arrested, they had 5 prepaid phones, 2 burner laptops, and a duffel bag with nearly $6,000 in cash. Helena's mugshot made the local paper. The headline was blunt: "Former HOA president charged in embezzlement scheme." I didn't take pleasure in it, not exactly, but when Jorge brought over a copy and set it on my kitchen table, I couldn't help but feel the balance had been restored. "Lots quiet these days," he said, sipping iced tea. "No more clipboard patrols, no more surprise citations." "Funny what happens when people stop being afraid," I said. He looked at me. "You know, this whole thing started because Pierce parked a little crooked." "Teenage rebellion has its uses," I said. 2 months later, the neighborhood held its first fair without HOA oversight. No permits, no fines, no passive-aggressive flyers stuffed in mailboxes. Just neighbors setting up booths, kids selling lemonade, and a local band playing out of someone's garage. Rachel came by with a clipboard not to enforce anything, but to hand out a petition. "We're drafting new bylaws," she said. "Want to make it so no board member can approve payments without a second signature, and no family members can be hired as vendors. Ever? Smart," I said, signing it. She smiled. "We're also limiting board terms to 2 years. No more queen bees." People were laughing again, talking, sharing food. It was everything a community should be, but hadn't been for a long time. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the band launched into a cover of an old rock song, I sat on a folding chair in front of the now empty lot. My lot. Still leased for events, but now with actual agreements, insurance, and transparency. Donna passed by with a plate of cookies. "Who knew the gravel pit would end up being the heart of the place?" "Turns out," I said. "All it needed was someone to stop pretending it belonged to everyone and start using it for everyone." She laughed. "Just don't let it go to your head, mister." Land baron. The next morning, I got a letter from the county clerk's office. The case against Helena and Richard was progressing. Preliminary hearing scheduled. Potential restitution order included. Donna and Rachel had filed a civil suit on behalf of the residents, aiming to recover the stolen funds. According to the attorney, the court had already frozen the Newells' assets. With any luck, the money would come back, some of it, at least. But even if it didn't, the damage was done in reverse. The power Helena once used to intimidate had turned into evidence, and her carefully constructed facade had cracked under the weight of her own greed. Pierce pulled into the driveway that afternoon, straighter than I'd ever managed. He stepped out of the car and looked across the street at the lot. "You really bought it?" he asked. "Yep, because she yelled at me." "That helped," he laughed. "Can I park there?" "Only if you lease it," I said. He rolled his eyes and walked inside. I looked across the street at the sign still standing tall and thought about how small things, a parking space, a clipboard, a fake invoice, can spiral into something bigger. But when people pay attention, speak up, and refuse to be pushed around, even the most entrenched bullies eventually lose their grip. And sometimes, all it takes is a crooked parking job to set things straight. The preliminary hearing was set for early Thursday morning. By then, the neighborhood had mostly moved on. Lawns were growing a bit longer without Helena's obsessive notices, and porch lights stayed on past 10 without warning letters. But beneath the surface, the case had become a quiet obsession for a few of us, the ones who had dug through the evidence, who had been on the receiving end of Helena's threats and fake fines. We weren't looking for revenge anymore. We wanted closure. That morning, I drove downtown with Donna and Rachel. The courthouse was a squat, gray building with no charm and less warmth. We passed through security and were directed to courtroom 4. Inside, the rows of benches were mostly empty, save a few residents who had taken off work to be there. Jorge was one of them. He gave me a short nod as we sat. The clerk called the case. The judge, a tired-looking man with a voice like gravel, summarized the charges: felony embezzlement, mail fraud, and obstruction of justice. Helena wore a beige pantsuit, as if trying to blend into the walls. Richard sat beside her, his tie already loosened. Their attorney, a man with the weary air of someone who'd been handed a hopeless case, stood to enter a not guilty plea. The DA's office had assigned a young prosecutor named Leland Carr. He didn't speak loudly, but what he lacked in volume he made up for in calm precision. Each point he made landed like a slow hammer. Over a period of 4 years, the defendants used their positions within the homeowners association to fabricate vendor payments, reroute association dues into personal accounts, and issue retaliatory notices when questioned. He paused and held up a printout of one of the fake invoices. Clearway Grounds Management does not exist. We've confirmed this with the Secretary of State's office. The listed business address is an empty lot behind a warehouse. Helena's attorney tried to object, but the judge waved him off. Carr continued. In addition to financial misconduct, the defendants are under investigation for mailing anonymous threats to a resident who legally acquired a parcel of land, one they had used without right or ownership for years. That letter was traced back to the defendant through security footage and handwriting analysis. I watched Helena's hand twitch as Carr spoke. Richard stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. After the hearing, the judge denied bail, too much flight risk. They were remanded into custody pending trial. No more rented houses in Nevada. No more burner phones. Outside the courtroom, Carr approached us. We've got enough to move forward with the full charges, he said, but we're also looking at restitution. If we can prove where the money went, we can try to claw some of it back. Donna stepped forward. We've got spreadsheets, copies of everything, and statements from residents who paid fake fines. Rachel added, we've already formed a fund to support anyone who wants to testify. Some folks are nervous, but they're ready to talk. You just say when. Carr gave a short nod. Good. The more testimony we have, the stronger our case. Back at home, I finally allowed myself a breath, the kind that loosens your shoulders and clears your head. The lot across the street looked the same: gravel, one sun-faded sign, and a few empty folding chairs from the last yard sale. But it felt different now. Like a battlefield after the smoke clears. That evening, Rachel stopped by. She had a folder tucked under her arm and a small mason jar in her hand. I made pear preserves, she said, handing the jar to me. Also, we finalized the new HOA charter. It's ready to distribute. I flipped through the pages: clear language, term limits, financial oversight, mandatory audits. You did all this in 2 months. We had help, she said. Donna's niece is a paralegal. Jorge handled the formatting. And believe it or not, Pierce designed the new website. My son, the one who nearly caused an HOA meltdown by parking crooked, Rachel laughed. He's good with graphics. And he added a section where residents can view meeting minutes, vote on proposals, and even upload documents. Total transparency. I opened the site on my phone. Clean layout, simple navigation, a running tally of expenses, and a calendar of upcoming votes. It looked more professional than half the city's official pages. Rachel leaned against the porch column. We're also setting up a community improvement fund. Any money we recover from Helena and Richard will go there. Residents can suggest and vote on how it's used. What kind of ideas are floating around? So far, a community garden, a tool library, and someone suggested a dog park. I nodded. That last one's probably Jorge. His bulldog's been digging trenches in his backyard. She laughed again. Probably. The sun was dipping low when she left. I sat outside a while longer, watching as neighbors walked dogs, pushed strollers, and waved to one another. Small things, but different now. Warmer. A few days later, Leland Carr called with an update. The DA's office had negotiated a plea deal. Helena and Richard would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution and a 5-year ban on holding any position in any HOA in the state. They'll also issue a formal apology, he said. Publicly. Part of the agreement. I didn't care much about the apology, but the restitution mattered. Carr explained that the court had frozen 2 of Richard's investment accounts. Between those and the proceeds from selling their house, the community would be able to recover just over $42,000. Not everything, but enough to repair the damage. That Sunday, the new board held a community meeting at the lot. This time, no one needed permission. Folding chairs were arranged in a wide circle. A table stood at the center with lemonade, cookies, and a stack of printed charters. Donna stepped up to speak first. "I spent most of my working life auditing companies," she said. "I've seen fraud from the inside before. But I never expected to see it here in my own neighborhood. That's what made it hurt more, but we didn't just expose it. We rebuilt something better." Next came Rachel. "We don't need fear to keep our streets clean or lawns trimmed. We need fairness, honesty, and trust. This new charter isn't perfect, but it's the start of something real." When it was my turn, I kept it short. This started with a parking job, but it ended with a community stepping up. That's no small thing. As the meeting wrapped up, Pierce walked over with a plate of cookies. He'd grown quieter since everything happened, not withdrawn, just more thoughtful. "You think it's really over?" he asked. "Mostly," I said. "There'll be new problems, but now we've got better people handling them." He nodded, then added, "I put together a code of conduct page for the website." "You think that's overkill?" "Not at all," I said. "In fact, maybe you should run for the board." He gave me a look. "Let's not go crazy." That night, I stood by the window and looked out at the lot. The sign had been replaced, just a small wooden post with a plaque that read, "Community Commons." Below that, "Maintained by neighborhood members." It wasn't mine anymore. Technically, I still held the deed, but I'd signed a long-term lease with the HOA for $1 a year, renewable indefinitely. The only condition, full transparency and public access. Later that week, a letter arrived from the DA's office. Inside was a copy of the signed apology from Helena and Richard. It was clinical, clearly written by their attorney, but it included something unexpected, a line stating they would never again attempt to join or influence any HOA anywhere. I folded it and slid it into a drawer. Done. The next time I saw Donna, she was leading a cleanup crew along the sidewalk, pulling weeds and repainting the neighborhood sign. Jorge was planting flowers nearby. Rachel was talking to a group of teens about adding bike racks near the park. No one mentioned Helena. No one needed to. We'd all seen what happens when power goes unchecked. Now we were learning what happens when it's shared, and it all began because someone dared to park 3 inches over a line that didn't even exist.